We would rather he relive that than have a relationship with him. Because God's request to Moses the second time was not that they would go and smite the rock. That had already happened. That was done. What Jesus paid on the cross is done. Now, let's start living in a place where we have fellowship with him. Let's start living in a place where we're talking with him, and then out comes river. If you look, in the beginning, we have the picture of God standing on the rock. We have Jesus being smitten for us. And then what comes out of that but rivers of water? Holy Spirit. From Jesus being crucified on the cross, the Holy Spirit was then released on the earth so that we could have communication with him. But we leave the communication out of the relationship so much. And so many of us return week after week after week after week up here to the rock, and we want to crucify Christ again, and we want to say, God, forgive me of my sins, and I'm sorry. And we live over and over and over in this salvation mode. I'm going to come back next week, I'm going to get saved again. I'm going to come back next week, I'm going to get saved again, because I know I can't live it right throughout the week. But he made it so that we could live it right. He gave us water the first time. There were rivers of water that came out of that rock the first time. We need to retain that water by continuing our communication with him. If we would continue the communication, that water will keep coming. That rock followed them around, it says in Corinthians. But because they cut off the communication, they forgot what he did in the past, and they decided that they needed to go ahead and crucify him again. The cross is an old hat phrase that goes into old songs. We don't talk about the cross. We don't remember that he died for us, that he was beaten hundreds of times. If you go back into the Greek, you see that he was beaten hundreds of times. When it says they took the rod and they hit him, that means that the entire company of soldiers, the 400 or 500 men, each one took the rod and hit him. That's just being hit with the rod. You're not counting the cat o' nine tails. You're not counting all the other things that happened to him. He was beaten hundreds of times for our sake. And we treat that so lightly that we think what we deserve is to be able to come in here once a week and be able to tell him, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back Monday, I'm going to live the way I was living. You can't go back to the way you were living after you visit the cross. Because if you really get into his presence, if you really break into where he is and who he is, you won't go back to where you're living. Because you'll be so compelled to live a better life. You'll be so inspired by what he did. The apostles may have not been so strong before. Peter may have lived a life where he was willing to swear a little bit and willing to deny Christ a little bit before the crucifixion. But after he understood how far Jesus was willing to go for him, never again would Peter. Jesus calls Peter the second time, and this time he doesn't just say, come and I'll make you a fisher of men. The second time Jesus says, I'll make you a fisher of men. And here's what's going to happen. People are going to stretch out your arms, and they're going to take you where you don't want to go. He was telling Peter, they're going to crucify you, and it's going to happen upside down. Are you ready? Are you willing? And Peter said, let me go. I want to do it. Because he understood how far Jesus was willing to go for him, that he was willing to go that far for Jesus. But we're not willing. Because we live with this much of Christianity. All we need is salvation. Let's cycle that around. Let's keep making us feel a little better. Because we're going to live the sinful life, and then we're going to come in here every week, and we're going to cycle around into, okay, so he died for me. Okay, he died for me. But it's just a subtle thought that comes through our head in one side and out the other, and it gets us through the week. But Jesus said in 16:17, we read 16:15 a lot. It says, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. But 17 says this. I want you to read this and I want you to think about it. It says, and these signs shall follow, shall. That's not a maybe. That's not a sometimes. That's not a every third. That's every time. These signs shall follow them that believe. In my name they shall cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Not a sometimes. A shall recover. Nate, we're not living in it. We're not living in it. I'm not telling you I'm walking this thing right, because I've been praying for people that are sick all week, and they're still sick. But James said, if there be any sick among you, call for the elders, lay hands on them, pray the prayer of faith that heals the sick. Not sometimes it heals the sick. Not sometimes they're going to cast out demons. Not sometimes we're going to take up serpents and not be harmed. Every time we're going to do it. But we're not doing it. We're not living that way, church. We're living so beneath the Christianity Christ described to us. Because we're settling for a Dr. Phil, Oprah Christianity of it makes us feel good. We're not doing any good. When we're living this way, we're not doing any good. They ought to come in sick, but they ought to leave healed. Demon-possessed people sitting in our church, they ought to come in with demons, but they ought to leave glorifying God. We can't have them coming in here and then leaving the same way they were. We can't have you coming in here and leaving the same way you are. Because if you come in here every week, you've been coming here for 10 years, you've been coming here for 5 years, you've been coming... How many people have you saved in the 10 years that you've been here? How many people have you laid hands on and seen them change? But we don't live in that Christianity. We don't live in a Christianity that is we believe it and it's going to happen. Jesus didn't argue with demons. He didn't have to argue with them. He said, before he said get out, they said, why are you here to torment me? Because you got too big of a spirit inside of you. It's coming into where I am. And so I need to get out of here, or I need to scream or something, because there's some kind of power in you. But so many of us could walk through the middle of people that are demon possessed, and they just grin at you. Because they know that you've got no power. We have the opportunity to have Christ live in us. We have the opportunity to have Holy Spirit live in us. To give us power, to give us strength, to give us everything that we need to accomplish every single task. To live a stress-free life. I'm not saying a money-abundant life. I'm saying a stress-free life. We can walk through everything. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That verse is not a verse that says, if I want to build a 10,000 square foot house today, I can. That's not what that means. That verse means everything that comes my way, I will be able to endure because Christ is standing behind me, giving me strength. I can do it through Him. We have an opportunity to be a part of the greatest move in history. We have an opportunity to be a part of the greatest revival that the world has ever seen. I'm not talking little church revival. We're not talking Sunday through Wednesday and then we'll see Wednesday if we think Thursday is going to be a good idea. We're talking revival that's citywide. People on planes turning to each other saying, you know where I'm going to Marshfield because there's revival in Marshfield. And they say, which church are you going to? And say, it doesn't matter. Every church is having revival. The school's having revival. The hospitals are empty. There's no such thing as a hospital in Marshfield. There's no such thing as a hospital in Springfield because every person is healed. We have the opportunity. I need you to understand that. We have the opportunity to be a part of that revival. Don't treat it lightly. You know how I know we have that opportunity? Exodus chapter 1. Pharaoh becomes afraid of the Hebrew people. Because Satan knows out of this generation comes one that brings covenant between God's people and God. Matthew chapter 2. Herod becomes afraid of the people in his cities. And he begins, just like Pharaoh did, to massacre a generation in infancy because he's afraid of what's coming out of that generation. He's afraid of the one that's going to bring reformation. You know how I know we're living in a time that says God's ready? Because in 1973, this country passed a law that should have horrified the church, should have alarmed the church of what time we're living in. It was Roe versus Wade that said it's okay for us once again, since Jesus' time, to massacre a generation in its infancy. Hundreds of millions of babies have been killed. And you know why? Because Satan knows. He knows what's coming out of this generation.